The Houston Cougars have the number one football player in the class of 2026 out of the state of Texas, and Brian's going to tell us why.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to a crossover edition of Locked On Sports. I'm here to Locked On Coogs, Parker Ainsworth, joined by Brian Smith of the newest addition, I think, to the network called The Portal. It covers NIL, college football recruiting, the transfer portal, and all kinds of things across the landscape. Brian, that's a lot of things to be covering in one show.
And that's why I do 2 or 3 podcasts a day, brother. Literally.
Doing it all the time. So I guess I got to ask, people might remember you from having covered recruiting on our show before at Locked On Coogs, but what made you want to do just one show that covers like everything?
When I was in high school, I was the guy that on Friday night was studying recruiting manuals and watching film or doing that. That's just the only thing I've ever wanted to do. That's it, man. I want to talk about football. I want to talk about rosters, who's good, why, what they've done lately. I just saw Keisean play recently. We'll talk about him here in a minute. I just love watching football and how roster management works now with NIL and everything. This is like the show created for me. This is my life.
It's a great addition to the network.
The show is entertainment for me.
It's a great addition to the network. I think fans will find it entertaining too. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime, whatever that's worth. Best place, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. But Brian, you mentioned talk about who's good and who's not good. And Keisean Henderson, 2026, Houston Cougar commit, is good. You saw him play in Miami. How was that?
He wasn't good. He was electric. And I knew that physically, like we discussed it last year at Future 50 Under Armour in IMG in Bradenton, Florida, if he decided to be free safety or wide receiver, whatever, we were talking with one of the trainers at Under Armour, like he's number one player in the country. We don't think he's quarterback. He just kept playing it, getting better and better. And then he was just lights out for a lot of the tournament at Battle Miami. And for those who don't know, the Battle Miami 7-on-7 tournament is from coast to coast, the best players. You got kids from Boston to LA. You got kids from Houston to Chicago. It is top to bottom, and of course the Southeast, especially Florida. And he lit people up. So I was
people up as a quarterback.
Yeah. That's the only thing he played. And the way it works for media, I can literally, and I did, stand right behind him. And on every play, I'm taking video, and he's just throwing dimes. I got a short of him somewhere laying around. It might even be on the portal, or I can't remember. But like, he just has a natural motion now. Like he's changed it. He's more on rhythm. He's more consistent. He knows where he's going. He's making reads after the snap. He's throwing to the second level of the field, which is the hardest, between the linebackers in front of the safeties. It's like, I told him to his face, I said, you're way better at quarterback now than you were last year. He kind of looked at me funny. Like he probably doesn't realize it, but it's a leap. It's not a jump. It's a leap. And then athletically, like you're allowed to blitz in this game and the way it's set up in battle. Terrible idea to blitz it. This makes guys look dumb. So only like one guy got it. It was a kid that's going to Notre Dame. There's another guy kind of similar level, but he makes the guy miss. The defense kind of hesitates because they watch him. Terrible idea. Your receiver's still running. And then he drills it. He can make throws on the run like when he's running, that's fast. That other guys can't make flat-footed. So I'm like, okay, this is legit. If I had to pick one kid for highest ceiling in the class, it's Keisean. Is he the safest pick for that? No, because he's still developing, but he wants to do it because he wants to prove everybody wrong. He's got an arm, 6'3", 6'4". He's still filling out in his body, and he's a really smart guy. There's no reason to think he can't be great. You know what I mean? Like,
no, he is really smart, and I'm glad you said that because I felt like a year ago that was kind of a not like people were kind of insinuating that would be wide players. And no, he's smart enough to play college quarterback. I don't know why that was ever a thought. I cut you off, sorry, but I'm glad you said that because people kind of assume that a runner that could play receiver isn't, and he's really sharp.
Yeah, if you have a conversation with him, it doesn't have to be about football. I've talked to him about other things. You can talk to him about anything. He'll pick it up. Naturally intelligent, that will not be a problem.
You said he got a lot better, and he looked at you funny, and I like the confidence and arrogance in that, frankly. I mean, like, I've always been good. But what did you notice? Because, like I said, a year ago, we were talking like he commits to Houston. We'll see what he plays. Now it's like, no, this dude's QB1, right? What was it? Throwing motion? You mentioned throwing in the run. What did he get so much better at? What stuck out?
Motion's definitely better because it's more consistent. Like when he follows through, he pushes through his front hip off his like he's right-handed for those that don't know. And when he throws, it just looks like it's supposed to. And it has zip on it. Like he's got an arm. On top of that, it's more about where he's going with the football. I've seen plenty of guys that have a cannon that stink because they don't understand post-snap progressions. And it's very hard. That's not algebra. That is calculus. But when you're talking about it, it's true. It's when you get like upper level, like what Saban's defense was, that match defense. Yeah, that's really complex. But you're talking about a scenario where he has the ability to, at least against zones and some combo defenses, the high school level, he's already starting to pick them apart. I'm really curious to see what he does this year. I might go down to Houston and see him play, but it's just different. Like I'd seen him last summer. They played him a little bit at future 50 at quarterback. They moved him to safety. They put him all over. He wasn't anywhere near as progressive as a quarterback then. The guy wasn't as wide open. It was a little iffy, but he had the arm. Still got to know where it's going. Now you can just see the light has kind of come on. That, it'll be, you have to start over at the college level because it's way faster. He'll throw some picks in practice and have to kind of adjust, but he's starting to understand how scheme works, and he's God gifted to a point. You can't teach it. So if he picks up the playbook stuff, obviously you need players around you and all that, but if Houston doesn't have receivers, it'd be surprising. You and I were talking about before the show, they always have somebody. Yeah. I think they'll be fine there. O-line is my bigger concern. He can't die playing quarterback to get protected. That's my biggest concern. That's not Houston's strength as a general rule. So they can keep him upright. This kid can go throw for 2,800 and run for 900. It'd just be a complete nuisance.
Well, and I want to ask you about, you mentioned he's got a high ceiling, and assuming that he's not just obliterated through a pass rush, because I think that obviously the next focus would be to protect him with recruiting and signing guys and things like that. Can I get a player comp, a ceiling and a floor player comp out of the guy? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but he is an electric athlete, and that makes a very unique ceiling and floor to me.
There aren't many kids as lengthy as he is. Like if you're standing next to Keisean, he's long at the hip. And what I mean by that, he's just got really long legs. He's built like a two guard that would play for the Cougars on the basketball court, the way he's built. And that's a good thing. I mean, he could probably walk onto their basketball team if he can shoot. I don't know if he's a basketball guy, but athletically, he could play with Houston 100%. Like he could jump out of the gym, all those things. So it's any guy that you can think of that's above 6'2", that also changes directions like a 5'8", 155-pound slot receiver. How many guys like that do you know?
It's not a lot, man.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like God gifted him a little bit differently. He changes directions for a long-legged kid, like the short little stubby slot receiver that, some guys might overlook because of their size. But if you use them right, they're really a pain in the butt. Keisean could go play slot receiver at LSU, and he'd be fine. Like LSU's as good as you get at receiver in the last decade. I think we can safely assume that. He'd be fine there. But he's going to be behind center. If you're blitzing, make sure that's what you want to do. Because if he breaks contain, all hell breaks loose. The most important thing for him, I guess, would also LSU, probably Jaden Daniels would be the comparison I would go with.
That's Heisman Trophy winning Jaden Daniels. I like where your head's at.
They're built similarly, and they have similar demeanors. So there you go.
Well, and Jaden Daniels is also in the NFL and kind of lighting it up at that level too. I want to keep talking about the future of this, but there is a quarterback in the interim between now and then because Keisean is class of 2026. Houston got a big-time transfer quarterback I want to talk to you about in a second. But I did want to remind the folks today's show is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to get laugh tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Attending big games, playoff games, Cougar basketball games, anything like that can create an experience like no other. The energy, excitement, and connection with the fans is unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing the Cougs along the way, jumping off the screen, Rockets games, Astros games, anything going on in Houston. Gametime makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Gametime Picks. It filters out the fluff and allows you to see the best deals possible on great seats so you can focus on what matters, which is being there. I used Game Time Fixer. I had tickets to, honestly, recently a concert, and it was great. You can see what's like in the venue. Also go to theater and all the kind of things around town. Couldn't have been easier. Found a super deal. Great seats. Knew what it was going to be. Knew what I was getting into. And all in pricing meant there were no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Parker Ainsworth, Brian Smith here talking Houston Cougars in the transfer portal and recruiting, NIL, all the things. Brian joins us from the Portal podcast, one of Locked On's newest shows. Brian, the show is called The Portal, and Houston started off portal season with a bang this year, at least relative to what Houston typically does. They went out and got Connor Wegman, a Houston area kid, 5-star, top end, all everything out of high school. Had some things go south at A&M, including getting hurt, losing his job while he was hurt.
That's right.
Doesn't go well. He also ran into your Notre Dame Fighting Irish, I should point out. I am talking to a Notre Dame fan. Can I ask first, before we get into his game, you saw Wegman commit to Houston and thought what?
Well, he's going to be playing for a disciplined coach. He's going to be playing for a guy in a system that is probably going to be a little more structured and consistent than what he walked into when he was under Jimbo. Lord only knows what the heck that was.
Lord only knows.
That was a train going off the rails there, brother. I think, unfortunately, the injury, he just couldn't stay freaking healthy. And I think it had him a little gun shy. When the Irish went after him in game one, he threw for 100 yards. That's pathetic for a kid with his talent. He was seeing ghosts because Notre Dame was bringing, they confused A&M's line. That was their weakness. And it just he never recovered from that last. He had a few moments, but he was inconsistent. And I think the O-line in general at A&M while he was there underwhelmed, and it just overwhelmed him. So if Houston can protect him, the arm is there. I've seen him play live. I've seen him play on TV. I saw him 2 years ago when he was playing against Miami down in South Florida. He could spin it. They protected him fairly well in that game for the most part. But look, if you're going to get to the point where you can be a good player at an upper level, you got to be able to take hits and still deliver it. Very few guys do that, though. If he's going to make that next step for Houston, that's the key for me.
Do you feel like the injury things, because, we are talking about a 3-year sample at a high school. Is it like he just got hit wrong a couple times, or some people also are just more prone to this? You got to see him play. I don't watch a lot of Aggie football, so you got to see him play a lot more than I have. I can put it on YouTube, but it's a little different when you're there in person, right? So do you think it's a prone to injury thing, or is it just caught a bad streak?
I think it's a little bit of both. He's a kid that has all kinds of ability, and he's a bigger guy, but sometimes you just get caught wrong. It's awkward. Some of the worst injuries ever are guys that are standing next to the pile. Somebody falls off. Remember Dwight Clark that played for the Niners back in the 80s or whatever? He was standing next to the pile. His knee got smoked, and his career was over.
Yeah.
That's just, it's kind of weird.
It's a violent game. Wrong place, wrong time can be bad.
Yeah. I tell a lot of O-linemen get rolled up on their own freaking running back hits their ankle or their Achilles. They're out 6 weeks, maybe a year and a half. It's just the way it is. So the other part of that, again, he hasn't had the greatest protection. Can Houston protect him? Well, I'm glad it's him, not me, standing back there. I don't have faith in that.
Well, that actually is a nice segue into the next part of this, because he commits right away. The next 4 commitments were all offensive linemen from Power 4 programs, and then they actually ended up adding a 5th as well shortly thereafter. Limited time, so I'll let you spin the dice. Matt Wyckoff, who was at Cal, had spent time at A&M before. Jason Brooks was at Oklahoma State and had spent a year at Vanderbilt before that. Dalton Merriman, you talk about guys that could play basketball. He's like 6'9". He played at Texas Tech. And then Mackenzie Agnello, he comes from New Mexico. And then I'm missing one. That is Alvin Ibaselli from Baylor. So they added guys with experience. I don't know which one of those guys jumped on the page to you. Obviously you cover the nation, so that's a whole different perspective than a guy from Texas, right? But anyone jump off the page for you as a guy that will help Wegman out here?
Wyckoff, I remember, but O-lineman, I try not to remember as recruits that much because it's so hard to project them. it's just insane how many great athletes at offensive line end up just being busts. Like they're right next to quarterback, it's about the highest rate of busts. It's really, really hard. But here's the key. You want as many bullets to put in the gun as possible. I trust the head coach at Houston. I trust that they have a system and they have a plan. They wouldn't have brought those guys in if they didn't think they had college production. Here's the new thing. Give you an example. I do Locked On Seminoles too. And last year they brought in a lot of guys from Bama and Georgia. They were highly coveted guys out of high school, but hadn't yet produced much, if at all, at the collegiate level. All but like one of them stunk. And by the way, Florida State went 2-10. A lot of these
I wouldn't even say that part.
It's just mind-boggling. But like Indiana took in a bunch of kids that were G5 and stuff and went 11-1. Now I know their schedule was pretty soft, but still, you win 11 games, you're doing something right. They took guys with proven production. Some guys just can't make the transition to college, being away from home, having an academic workload that's real instead of just garbage in high school, having to fend for yourself day-to-day time management. These guys have proven they could do it, or they wouldn't have been productive at whatever school they were at. So that's the route that a bunch of schools are going with. And I even had a coach tell me, 5 stars, I won't mention his name, but I saw him at a game a year or so ago, and he's like, you get to college, you don't get it right, you're done. You're gone. And I was like, yeah. And it's just being proven more and more. They don't care what your ranking is after about a year. If you don't show the right steps to get better, you're gone. And I think Fritz and his staff understand that. Now, a few of these guys have had some ranking or whatever, but they also had production. So, and a few of them weren't as highly ranked, and they had production. That's the only thing Willie cares about. They can play.
It's the only thing he cares about. I will say the only other consistent thing, guys that got to play, and then guys that are, with the exception of Agnello, I guess Agnello's from Central Texas, and the rest of these guys are from greater Houston area, Magnolia, Dobie High School, Montgomery's right outside of town, right? And so I think that you're seeing a lot of that being the focus too. We've talked about them being a successful recipe for a lot of positions. In your experience, are you seeing a lot of offensive line production come out of the Houston area? Or you just said how hard it is to project that position, but looking back, are you like, oh yeah, they actually had a bunch of guys, a bunch of big guys from that area, or is it mostly these receivers and quarterbacks we think of?
Houston is everything. Like from a recruiting perspective, you can get your entire program within 100 miles of downtown Houston.
That's good because that's what I think Willie's trying to do. So that's a good sign for the Cougs and for Coug fans, because honestly, he made a big deal out of at Big 12 Media Day that he loved how he didn't have to get on a plane to go recruiting. And I thought that was an interesting way to phrase it. Like everyone can drive to campus.
Yeah, he'll get a kid from Baton Rouge or something once in a while, but he's going 4 hours to get a player instead of 14.
Whole different game. And it's a lot different than recruiting at Tulane was too. As we move kind of into the third segment, though, Brian, I want to talk some about the future of this, because Connor Wegman is, he wouldn't have come to Houston if he weren't going to start in 2025. He has 2 years of eligibility, so I guess he could be back in 2026. With college football, it's hard to tell who's going to be back when, right? Keisean is committed in class 2026 kid. There are a lot of people talking, though, after the spring he's having about the Power 4 offers he's getting at quarterback. The future of this thing, right? Houston's had good quarterbacks. Case Keenum, Greg Ward, go back to Andre Ware, right? When you see this as a national guy, it's easy to get like in the fog inside of it, like myself or other Houston Cougar fans. Do you see something spinning and changing, or are you still waiting to see?
Well, if you mean where Keisean's going to end up, I think if I had to pick, I'd still say it's Houston, but he's going to take visits. I'm convinced of that. He's talking to too many schools for it not to happen in some capacity, and I would too. You get money on these visits, whether it's legal or not. He's going to get money. That's how that works. I don't really care if that's NCAA's got as many teeth as a dead person, so it doesn't make any difference. But they're pathetic. So
they're pathetic is a good way to put it.
It's one of the most worthless institutions on planet Earth. Besides that, they're doing great. But at the same time, the key here is it's got to play out. He didn't get recruited as a quarterback by anybody but Houston initially. It's just kind of an awkward deal. Again, he looked a lot better. I saw it with my own eyes from 5 feet away. He could spin it. So we'll see. I think he won't care that Wegman's there for another year because he would still play in some capacity. He'd probably play receiver some or whatever, and he'd run packages and he'd be the backup. So, and Wegman's, let's be honest, he's kind of injury prone. Keisean probably start at some point during the year if I was to guess.
Or, obviously get a couple drives while they're figuring out what's wrong with an ankle or something like that. So
Sure.
I guess that's a good way to put it. He's not going to be scared off of, hey, I'm getting these visits and you've got Connor Wegman there. Like that's not enough to break the loyalty that it feels like he's holding. Because my understanding at this point is that Houston offering him as a quarterback as early as they did is really carrying a lot of weight right now. Is that your understanding too?
He didn't tell me because I didn't ask. I probably should have. But loyalty matters. And like the 7-on team he played with was a bunch of local kids, Houston to San Antonio. It's 3-hour drive or whatever.
Right.
And he knew the guys. One of his teammates at his high school was on the team. He likes that stuff. So he's kind of a home guy. If you're loyal to him, he'll look at it. And again, he can pick up the phone right now and go to LSU. He can pick up the phone right now and go to Florida State. He can pick up the phone right now and go to Auburn. All these places that have crazy crowds, more money, NIL that is insane. And he's committed to Houston. He's not your normal guy.
He's not. I have one question on the weirdness of him in a second. But, NIL money is one of the things you cover. And I don't mean to say that you're in the weeds on every Houston Cougar NIL dollar because there's no way you do that for every single institution.
If I
even
ever
across
do
the Power
that,
Four.
please shoot me.
But I think it's safe to say that it does feel like people know he's a big deal and whatever dollars they have to throw, he's getting them, right? Is there a threshold as you see it where guys are like, hey, once they get past X, they're all kind of like, that's not the most important thing as long as they have some baseline of, XYZ or whatever? Or is it more person to person? You've done this across the nation. And again, we get pigeonholed.
It depends on the scenario. Let me give you an example. I won't go into the kid, but I know of a recent scenario. Kid probably doesn't have the best leadership at home. The high school coach made it known wherever he goes, I'm getting a cut. Now, personally, I'd like to go beat the you-know-what out of that coach.
That's pretty bad coaching, yeah.
And it changed where the kid went to school, and he made a bad decision. So everything is based on scenario. Now, I can tell you from knowing Keisean, I don't know the other kid. I'd met him, but I don't know him. Keyshawn's too sharp for that. He don't give a crap what anybody thinks. He's going to do what he's going to do. So, and I'm not just talking about a hard-headed teenager. He knows he puts his mind to something he can't, and he's got gifts he can't teach, obviously. But he wants to be comfortable. He wants to play the spot he wants to play. If they're competitive, it ain't going to. I'm going to tell you right now, Houston ain't going to offer what like the Gators are going to offer, or what Auburn's going to offer. Like the big Yellowwood company here in state of Alabama where I live does lumber and all kinds of things. They're a big sponsor. Like just them alone, they can do whatever. He will get 7-figure offers to go to other schools. Does Houston match that? Maybe, maybe not. But they probably won't, if I was to guess. There could always be one boot. It only takes one person to say, you know what? This is a lifelong opportunity. I'm going to die in 5 years. I want to see this team make a playoff run.
Well, if you're Tillman Fertitta, I guess he's about to be an ambassador somewhere, maybe a parting gift. I just wonder, because it's all, again, I coach high school basketball and I do this. It's all so much more money than I was ever going to see. I feel like at some threshold, intuitively, I would be like, well, how much more do I really need if I can be close to home and, those kinds of things. But also, there's some people that had a lot less comfort growing up, just different levels of what you need and what you don't need. And so I don't know what every kid, where Keisean be on that. I would think playing in Houston would be a big deal, though, right? He loves the city.
I would assume that's one of the reasons he made his initial decision. Why else?
Yeah.
It's not like Houston was lighting the world on fire.
Well, he committed super early, too. He could have waited. Even if he liked Houston, he could have waited to commit, I guess, right?
True.
So last question, because he is very smart. He is very gifted, and the future of the program, if he comes, and I thinking it's really going to happen, is pretty bright. What's the deal with this raccoon skin cap?
He wears it wherever he goes. He just likes it.
It's very unique. You can find him right away. It sticks out like a sore thumb. You hadn't found anything there. It's just his thing.
I haven't asked him. I'm sure he gets asked all the time. I don't care.
Yeah,
It's funny. When the last time I was with him, we were in the middle of a conversation. This little kid walks up and says, "Can I get a picture with you?" I think the kids like it too.
The kids like. So what you're saying is the NIL program is we'll sell a bunch of hats, and we can,
Don't laugh. That's a thing.
We can sell a bunch of hats and say, "Hey, every dollar's going in your pocket, kid."
There you go.
Brian, you got a brand new show, so I want to make sure you get a chance here to plug it because Houston Cougar fans do follow recruiting. They liked you when you were on as the recruiting expert. Now you got our own show where you can be an expert on your show. Where can people find that show? What is it called? Give people the details on that because it's a fun project.
If you just search the portal on YouTube, or if you search it on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Sports Spider, wherever you get your pods, you can get the portal. And we're, of course, just easy to find based on that. That's word. Think about it. If you follow recruiting, when do you not say the portal once in a while? That's why we named it that. It's easy. So with that, we cover recruiting, NIL, and the transfer portal all day, every day. That's what I talk about. And I'm going to start doing breakdowns of top 100 lists, top kids in Houston. I just did a show on Dallas, like on National Signing Day. One of my buddies covers Houston area stuff too. I might hook up to that, but got one buddy who did one on Dallas. So we cover it from different perspectives. Booby Feaster is arguably the best player in the country in class 27 from Dallas. We talked about him. He retweeted it. You know what I mean? Like, Booby's a great kid. But there's all kinds of things to talk about because it's all roster management every day of the week.
So what I'm not going to rub in that you just did Dallas before Houston. I mean, come on, Brian.
It is what it is, man.
It is what it is. Obviously, as more comes out about Keisean, transfer portal, Houston, if big-time recruits want to come play with Keisean, those kind of things, we'll be sure to get another crossover in soon when those kinds of things happen. Make sure you go check out the portal, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again, Brian. I'm excited that you think that Keisean's going to be a Coug as well. I wrap up with Go Cougs every day. We're not going to think about what Notre Dame did to Conor Weigman as we get into the fall, though. We're just going to flush that one. Flush that one.
That's fair. That's fair.